This is Professor Cruz. Welcome to week 11 of World Cultural Geography. Our topic this week is political geography. Political geography is concerned with the study of the way governments organize and administer space on Earth's surface and the geographic dimensions of conflict. As geographer Jerome O. Tothell said, political geography, quote, is about power, an ever changing map revealing the struggle over borders, space, and authority. One of Earth's most, end quote. One of Earth's most fundamental cultural characteristics is the division of our planet's surface into a collection of spaces occupied by individual countries. Throughout time, wars have been fought between states and among cultural groups within countries. Geographers use geographic methods to examine the causes of political change and instability to anticipate potential trouble spots around the world. Our questions for consideration this week: what is a country, or state as you will find that it is called? Where are states distributed? How has the global distribution of power changed over time? And why do boundaries cause problems? So let's talk about a state. What is a state? A state is an area organized into a political unit and ruled by an established government that has control over internal and foreign affairs. So think about the state called the United States in this case. It occupies a defined territory on Earth's surface and contains a permanent population. A state has sovereignty, which means independence from control of its internal affairs by other states. For the most part, a country is synonymous with state. So we're confused in the United States. We have states within our global state of the United States. If you examine the Europe-Asia landmass, you will find the largest state, Russia, which encompasses 17.1 million square kilometers, or 6.6 million square miles, and the smallest state that is a member of the United Nations, and that is Monaco at 1.5 square kilometers, or 6.6 square miles. Monaco is an example of a microstate, a state with a very small land area. And on this map, those states are indicated with the pins. Today, almost all inhabitable land belongs to one country or another. But for most of history, that has not been the case. As recently as the 1940s, the world contained only about 50 countries, compared with approximately 200 countries today. This map shows the world by country and colonies in 1910. You can see that areas that are now countries in Asia and Australia were once part of the British or German empires. Areas that are now African countries were part of the British, German, French, and Portuguese empires. South America was part of the Portuguese Empire, which is why Portuguese is the dominant language in Brazil. The distribution of power was considerably different in 1910 than it is today. If you look at a current world map, you will see that Europe now has about 45 independent countries just by itself. South America has 12, and Africa has 54. The distribution of power has greatly shifted. The United Nations is the world's most important global organization. The United Nations has provided a forum for the discussion of international problems. On occasion, the UN has intervened in conflicts between or within member states, authorizing military and peacekeeping actions. The United Nations seeks to promote international cooperation, to address global economic problems, promote human rights, and provide humanitarian relief. The UN members can vote to establish peacekeeping forces and request states to contribute military forces. The United Nations tries to maintain neutrality. The United Nations was created at the end of World War II and had 54 member states. The number of UN members in 2016 is 193. The United Nations, which was created after World War I, was the world's first attempt at an international peacekeeping organization. However, the United States never joined, and the League of Nations fell apart as it was unable to stop aggression in the 1930s. It fell apart in the 1930s, just prior to World War II. Your text has a map showing the countries that are members of the United Nations and the years in which individual nations became members. UN membership increased rapidly on 3 occasions. In the 1950s, when 16 mostly European countries joined as a result of the Nazi Germany breakup. In the 1960s, 17 mostly former African colonies joined. And in the 1990s, in the early 1990s, 26 countries joined as a result of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia breakup. Disagreement exists between the actual number of sovereign states as a result of historical disputes involving more than one claim to a territory. Most countries consider China, which is called the People's Republic of China, and Taiwan, also called the Republic of China, as separate and sovereign states. However, the China government considers Taiwan as part of China. Western Sahara, or also called the Sahrawi Republic, most African countries consider Western Sahara a sovereign state. However, Morocco claims part of the territory. In the early 1980s, Moroccans built a 2,500-kilometer wall separating the free territories of occupied Sahara. So in this image, you can see that the world's largest defensive structure, which is this wall in the Western Sahara. Korea was divided into northern and southern sections along the 38 degrees north latitude after World War II. This division was made by the U.S. and the former Soviet Union. While both Korean governments are committed to unification, the nations remain separate. This nighttime satellite image shows the illumination of electric lights that illustrate the differences in per capita power consumption in the two countries, with South Korea at 10,162 kilowatt hours versus North Korea at 739 kilowatt hours. A real difference in the distribution of energy among these two states. Antarctica is the only large landmass in the world that is not part of a sovereign state. It comprises 14 million square kilometers, or 5.4 million square miles, which makes it 50% larger than Canada. Portions are claimed by Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom. As you can see by looking at this map, which shows which countries have claims by Argentina, Chile, and the United Kingdom are conflicting. So all three states are claiming the same areas of land in Antarctica. You can see here that the United States has no claim on lands in Antarctica. After the French claim of Antilles land caused Americas to demand retaliatory action, the United States official position was announced in 1924 that it did not consider claims to Antarctica. By the Secretary of State Charles Evans Hughes stated, "It is the opinion of this government that the discovery of lands unknown to civilization, even when coupled with a formal taking of possession, does not support a valid claim of sovereignty unless the discovery is followed by an actual settlement of the discovered country. And as Antarctica has remained unsettled, it considers it to be unclaimable." A boundary is an invisible line that marks the extent of a state's territory. Boundaries completely surround an individual state to mark the outer limits of control and give it a distinct shape. Historically, frontiers separated states. A frontier is a zone where no state has control, but frontiers have been replaced by boundaries. Physical boundaries, such as deserts, mountains, and water, may be effective because they are a barrier to movement. Physical boundaries can also be seen on a map or on the ground. In this map, you see that the part of the boundary between the United States and Mexico is the Rio Grande, which separates Texas from Mexico. The Sahara Desert serves as boundaries in part of the northern Africa. The Pyrenees Mountains in Europe separate France from Spain. Geometric measures are often used to separate boundaries, such as the boundary between the United States and Canada and the boundary between North and South Korea mentioned earlier at 38 degrees north latitude. Other cultural boundaries include religion and language and ethnicity, which are not so easily categorized. While part of the U.S. boundary with Mexico is the Rio Grande, the other part of the some of the other part of the 2,000-mile-long border is divided by a wall across the desert. In other places, it is simply marked by a sign or a fence. So in this image below, you see an area of the boundary of Mexico and the United States that actually has a wall. Africa has 15 landlocked countries, more than any other continent. There may be a connection between countries that are landlocked and economic well-being. Landlocked countries have no access to the coast and must therefore trade with or through other countries. If there is no conflict in the region and the countries are well managed and resource rich, they may be okay. But if they are not managed well or resource poor, they are dependent upon the success and policies of their neighbors. On the other hand, coastal nations have the ability to trade with the world. Who has more power, coastal or landlocked countries? The shape and configuration of a state can make it harder or easier to administer, but the shapes and configuration do not determine stability. There are always other factors to consider, as geography is not destiny, but it may have an impact on the inhabitants' destinies, as most people remain for life in the nation they were born. Compact nations are more efficient as the distance from the boundary does not vary significantly. The ideal compact state would be shaped like a circle, with the capital at the center and the shortest possible boundary to defend. A compact state ideally has efficient communication and transportation. Elongated states may have poor communication. A region at the end of a nation may be isolated from its capital. So as you can see in this example, the elongated state of Vietnam, Hanoi, the capital, is at the northern end of the state, where Ho Chi Minh City is at the southern end. A perforated state completely surrounds another state, which is called an enclave. In this situation, the state that is surrounded may face problems of dependence and or interference from the surrounding state. South Africa completely surrounds the state of Lesotho, shown in this image. A fragmented state includes several discontinuous pieces of territory. So fragmented states would be the Philippines and Indonesia, for example. Fragmented states are separated by water, can face problems and costs associated with communications and maintaining national unity. Fragmented states separated by intervening states may sometimes have problems dealing with the states in between the fragments. And here we see regime types by country in 2013. National governments can be classified as democratic, autocratic, or anocratic. A democracy is a country in which citizens elect leaders and can run for office. An autocracy is a country that is run according to the interest of a ruler, and those countries are shown in the map here in red, while the democratic-leaning countries are shown in blue. And then an anocracy is a country that is neither fully democratic or autocratic, but displays a mix of the two types. Democracies and autocracies differ in three essential elements: the selection of leaders, citizen participation, and checks and balances. According to the Center for Systematic Peace, more states are either democratic rather than autocratic or anocratic. The number of autocracies has declined sharply since the late 1990s with the breakup of the Soviet Union. The Arab Spring has most recently contributed to the reduction of autocracies in Africa. And at the state level or the country level, we have federal versus unitarian types of governments. The United States is a federal state, while there is a central government that develops federal legislation. Local governments are states in the United States adopt laws. Most large states, such as the United States, Russia, India, and Canada, are federal. China is an example of a large state that is not federal. There's a global trend towards federal governments as there is a global trend towards democracy. Ethnic groups demanding self-determination will likely be formed in these federal states. Unitary states, the power resides at the central level where the laws are created, and therefore effective communication is needed to communicate information about laws and guidance to the regions in the state. Unitary systems are common in smaller states and are common in Europe, and it works best when cultural differences are minimal. So examples of unitarian states are France, China, Cuba, Kenya, and Rwanda. And a bit about electoral geography, as we are in an election year in 2016. Geographers can create formal culture regions based on voting patterns. So that term culture regions from chapter 1. They also examine voting patterns among functional regions such as voting districts or precincts. While we often see maps that show voting patterns at the state level, we see the red and the blue states showing the states that voted majority Democrat, which would be shaded blue, or Republican showing red. The map appears different when you look at it at a country level and you add the color purple. So if you mix blue and red, you get purple. And so here we see areas appearing in various shades of purple. These are areas which are more equally divided by Republicans and Democrats. So when you show the map by state, more states appear red, but the more populous areas are blue, which is why Obama won the election. So if you look at the populous areas such as Southern California, New York, and places where there are major cities, more of the population voted Democrat. When a third color is added to the map, the pattern of the distribution of power is less clear. So the purple states are states which are neither controlled by the Democrats or Republicans. Every 10 years, the Census Bureau conducts a national census to show how many people are in the nation and where those people live. The reason the census is done is to determine how power is distributed in the United States. After each census, the boundaries separating the 435 legislative districts for the United States House of Representatives are redrawn based on the changing population. They are examined to ensure that they have approximately equal populations, as we are supposed to have one person, one vote. Each person's vote is supposed to be equal. The redrawing of the boundaries after the census is a geographic action. Boundaries must be redrawn as population change results in districts gaining population and other districts losing population. The process of redrawing legislative boundaries for the purpose of benefiting the party in power is called gerrymandering. The political party in control of the state legislature naturally attempts to redraw boundaries to improve the chances that it wins seats in future elections. So as you can see from the example here, there are many ways to divide the districts, but some are unfair and less compact. The first perfect representation equally divides the region according to the fact that 60% are blue and 40% are red. So it creates 3 blue districts and 2 red districts. In the second example, it creates 5 blue districts and 0 red districts. The regions are compact, but they've drawn so that the red group doesn't get any power. And the third district, which is a real example of gerrymandering, and it's because the regions meander throughout the districts meander throughout the region. You have 2 blue districts and 3 red districts, which is also unfair. So you can draw district boundaries to concentrate all the opposition's party into one district, creating an unnecessarily large majority, while also ensuring that that party can't win elsewhere, or drawing the district boundaries to dilute the opposition's vote so that it does not form a simple majority anywhere. If you think about this process as geographic inquiry, you can consider the question asked: how many people, when the census is taken, how many people live in each state, and how do they tend to vote? The census collects the information about where people live, and information about voting patterns is added. The data is organized and analyzed, and the action is to draw the legislative boundaries after each census. So this is a geographic action. So your questions for consideration as you consider this chapter: how has the global power distribution changed over time? And for next week, consider human development. If you were developing an index to measure development, what characteristics would you use? Thank you for considering these geographic questions as we move forward.